A very warm welcome to you. My name's Richard Bober, and I'm leading the class tonight. Usually it's Colin Ash, but next week it will be Ajahn Subhaddo from his little kuti in Spain. He will join us and lead the class next week. That's next Thursday the 25th of February. I'll mention that again before we finish. So, how do we begin to meditate? Well, usually people start by arranging themselves in an upright, comfortable posture. And I thought we'd just do a little bit of that today. If you're really new to meditation, this is the way in. And if you're an old hand, please just bear with me. So just get a sitting position that you can hold comfortably for about half an hour or so, where your legs are not going to get too cramped, and that feels reasonably upright and stable. And then just park your hands somewhere neutral, either on your lap or on your thighs, just somewhere where you don't have to worry about what to do with them. Upturned or downturned, resting one in the other. Just experiment and see what works for you. And mostly we meditate with our eyes closed. There are some traditions that have their eyes open, and you might want to experiment and see what works best for you. But generally, if you close your eyes or just have your gaze downwards at a neutral space, a blank carpet or floor, or something like that. And if at all you feel sleepy at any time during your meditation, it's always open to you just to open your eyes and let some light in. But see if you can have a blank or neutral backdrop to your meditation space. And the idea of this is that we're limiting input into our senses. And then we're going to begin in the usual way we begin, by just noticing parts of the body. And here I want to be quite specific about how we do this noticing. We're not thinking about or imagining, but we're really sensing, feeling. So I'm going to invite you now just to feel the points of contact you have with the floor. That would be the soles of your feet if you're sitting on a Western chair, or if you're sitting on the floor on a meditation cushion, a zafu, something like that. It'll be your ankles and your shins, perhaps. So really just the invitation is just to sense those points of contact with the floor. Deliberately allow your attention to sink downwards. So what is it you feel? What is the contact like? So the invitation is to really intimately know the sense of the contact. And perhaps it's useful to remind ourselves that there's no right or wrong way to have that contact. It's how it occurs for you in your field of consciousness. So, what is it like right now? And then I invite you to move your attention up your lower leg to the calf area and the shins. And in the same way, without thinking about or imagining them, just sense what they feel like. And gradually allow your attention to drift upwards towards your knees. And as we're doing this body scan, I invite you just to introduce right from the outset a sense of kindness towards yourself. So as we do the scanning and the noticing, just have a sense of just gentleness, softness towards yourself, towards how you're thinking, how you're feeling. Just a sense of that it's okay to be as you are. And now I invite you to allow your attention to drift up your legs, your upper legs, taking in your quadriceps at the front and your hamstrings at the back. Feel the contact with the chair or the cushion. And just allow your attention to move upwards towards your pelvis. Again, the invitation is to really feel, to sense, and if we can, to do it with kindness. And then allow your attention to feel your sitting bones on the chair or the cushion. And just feel how they're supporting the weight of your torso. Feel the pressure, feel the support. And when you're ready, in your own time, allow your attention to move upwards again from your pelvis through the lower part of your torso, paying special attention to the spine at the back. Again, just reminding you, really feel, really sense what's going on. Noticing the areas where there's nothing much to sense. So with the spine, it's always useful to have it upright when we're meditating in this way. Not rigidly straight, but just upright and relaxed. And if you need some support, that's fine too. And just allowing your attention to move up towards your neck and shoulder area. Again, sensing whatever's there. And keeping a kind attitude towards ourselves in mind. And when we get to the neck and shoulder area, just see if we can align our neck and our head with our spine so that everything's in a nice upright column. Perhaps just take a moment or two now to feel the arms from the tips of the fingers, the hands, the forearms, the upper arms. Just take in the whole of the arms and the hands and just feel what they're like. So when you get up to the shoulders, move your attention upwards into the neck and the head area. And then just take a moment or two. And the invitation is now just to feel the weight of your head resting on your neck, all nicely aligned with your spine and your pelvis. Just feel it. And now I invite you to allow your attention to move to the crown of your head and just to lengthen a fraction towards the sky. And if you can, in this upright, centered position, see if you can just relax, but keep the position, keep the upright posture, and see if you can just allow yourself with kindness to relax into it. And now I invite you just to get a sense of the whole of your physical body, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, taking in your spine, your sitting bones, your shoulders, your hands, the whole of your physical body. Just feel the clothes on your skin surface and the air on your hands and your face. So we're getting a sense of the boundaries of our physical body. So please feel free to stretch, take a sip of water, adjust your posture, open your eyes. If you're new to meditation, and even if you're not new, a body scan is a good way to start. It's really a good idea to ground our attention in the physical body. And one of the reasons that we do this is because if our attention is located in any aspect of our physical body, we are in the present moment. Think about it. If you're really sensing how your feet are, how they feel resting on the floor, you're not feeling your feet as they were a minute ago. You're not feeling your feet as they are going to be in a minute's time. You're feeling them as they are right now. So it's one way of bringing ourselves into the present moment. And that's a large part of the practice. But there's another element to this that I want to introduce this evening. I don't know if any of you looked on the website earlier today, but I think the Buddhist Society had entitled this particular talk this evening, The 3 R's of Meditation. You've heard of the 3 R's of education: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I've often thought that you could apply a similar set of alphabetic initials to meditation. And the first R, one of the things that I always remind myself in my meditation is it's one of recognition. When we're doing a body scan like that, essentially what we're doing is we're recognizing what's there. So we're paying attention, we're noticing. Many teachers will talk about noticing. That's absolutely correct. It is noticing. We're just, to use the London slang, we're clocking what's there, recognizing. And one of the interesting things about the word recognizing is that it comes from the Latin recognito. Cognito is to know, and recognito is to know again. So we're re-knowing what's there. So most of the time we walk around with our bodies and we're only vaguely aware of them unless we knock them or damage them in some way, and then ouch, that hurts, and we're suddenly aware of them. But most of the time we take them for granted. When we sit in meditation, we're actually knowing moment by moment what is there. So we're re-knowing it in a way. And of course, one of the Buddha's teachings was that there are 3 things that are blockages, if you like. Some of the texts call them poisons, but I prefer to think of them as blockages that prevent us from knowing reality. And you'll have heard of them. They're called greed, hatred, and delusion. And delusion is one of the key blockages in our thinking. We think we know reality. And this training is to re-know it. The word, the Buddha, the very word Buddha, means the one who is awake. And the Buddha's enlightenment and his teachings that follow from that are all about awakening. And one of the very small steps that we can take along that path is simply to notice what's there, to re-know it moment by moment. So one of the Buddha's teachings is that we have this fundamental ignorance of the way things are. And recognition is beginning to dismantle that, to know things as they are. So what do we need in order to progress on this path, in order to walk this path? One is a strong intention, and this is always useful in meditation, is that before we start, we just reaffirm our intention, just to stick with it. Nothing more than that. We're going to sit here and we're going to practice. We're just going to stay with it. So a strong intention just to stay with it. And of course, our minds will drift off onto this and that. That's what minds do. And I think it's always useful to reflect that we have bodies, and within our bodies we have blood that flows. We have lungs, lungs that breathe. We have a heart that beats. And we have a mind that thinks. It's natural, it's normal. So when you find yourself thinking in meditation, you haven't got it wrong, you haven't made a mistake. It's natural, that's normal, that's what minds do. And we notice it. And this is the key. We recognize when we are thinking. We recognize it. We re-know it. So instead of being lost in the thought, we clock it, that we are thinking. We re-know. And then we have a choice about what we do with that. So this first step is in meditation, before we begin our practice, is really to reaffirm our intention, just to stay with it. Whatever the period we've set ourselves, whether it's 20 minutes or half an hour, we're going to stay there, come what may. I would add a little caveat to that, is that if the fire alarm sounds in the building that you're in, that probably is a good reason to disturb your meditation and to leave by the nearest exit. I say that as once in my working life, I was a fire officer for the building I worked in. So please don't sit through a fire alarm. Respond. But otherwise, generally, unless it's an emergency like that, stay with your practice, come what may. So a strong intention is a good place to start. There's a story that I'm really very fond of in the Buddhist world. It's of a person who is asleep in a hut at night, and there's no electricity in the hut, and it's in the tropical regions, as many of these stories come from the tropics, and it's pitch black, and he's lying there asleep, and the moon comes out, and he moves, and his natural sleep cycle, he wakes for a bit, and in the moonlight he sees, in the corner of the hut, he sees a snake, coiled, not moving. And he's absolutely terrified. He freezes because he knows that one bite from this snake, and that's his life gone. So he doesn't know what to do. So he just absolutely freezes and stays still. And then eventually, as the hours pass, the moon goes down and the sun begins to rise. And in the light of dawn, when the sun's rays enter the window of the hut and begin to cast light into every corner, he sees the coiled snake, and he realizes, it's not a snake, it's a rope. And his fear dissipates, and he breathes a sigh of relief, and he sees that he had been frozen in fear for several hours in the darkness, because he thought it was a snake, when really it was just a coiled rope. And daylight dispelled his illusion. And of course, the story is a metaphor for awakening. We recognize what's there. We see things as they really are. We know things as they are. Ajahn Subhaddo, the abbot of Amaravati, the first abbot of Amaravati, always used to teach, this is the way it is. It's like this, he used to say frequently. How is it? It's like this. This is seeing things the way they are without complicating anything, not adding anything to it. So if we're noticing our bodies as we do in the body scan, it's like this. The soles of our feet feel like this right now. Our breathing is like this right now. Our heartbeat is like this right now. So seeing things as they are is a big step in awakening. So that perhaps is the first R in meditation, is a recognition, recognizing. It's a training, it's a practice. What's the second R in meditation? Well, from recognizing, we then have a choice. And the second R is one of release. In the story of the gentleman who was asleep in the hut and he saw that it was a rope and not a snake, he was released from his fear. He was released, he found freedom in seeing things as they were, as they are. So in meditation, once we have clocked, once we see things as they are, we have a choice about what we do with that. Now, in the practice, the invitation is to choose to return to the present moment. And in the next practice we're going to do, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, we're going to work with the breath. And the breath is really useful as an anchor for our attention. So when we notice that our mind has moved from the breath and that we're thinking, and we clock it, we can choose to return our attention to the present moment by moving it back to the breath. And that's the release aspect. We release the thoughts that we've got hooked on because we've clocked them, and we have an intention to be in the present moment, to follow the practice, so we can release the thoughts. This is release back into the present moment, back into the way things are right now. Because think about it, most thoughts that we have are either about the past or about the future. Even if we're thinking about the next breath, it may be very immediate, it may be just coming, but it's about the future. If your attention is located on this breath, you're in the present moment. If you're actually feeling it. So release, returning. So just to work with the breath a bit. Many of you will be very familiar with this practice, but it's always worth reminding ourselves of what we're doing here. We always have the breath with us, so we don't have to introduce any new element into our system. It's always there. And traditionally, in the teachings, you'll find that the invitation is to find where it occurs most vividly for you. So if you're new to practice, it's worth just experimenting a little bit and finding where you can pick it up most easily. That's usually the chest area or the abdomen, or sometimes at the rim of the nostrils. So let's go into this practice now and begin working with the breath. And I'll give some instruction to begin with, and then I'll I'll go quiet and let you actually find your own way. So if you just come back to your upright meditation posture, and just for a moment or two, just center yourself, feel your feet on the ground or your ankles and shins on the floor. Just get a sense of your physical body. And then in your own time, when you're ready, I invite you just to pick up the movement caused by the breath, to sense it. See if you can leave the breath alone, not alter it in any way, but just feel it. Feel the movement caused by the breath. And again, I invite you to do this with kindness, kindness for yourself. So if you notice yourself drifting off into thoughts, just recognize that. Release the thought and return to the breath with kindness. Please feel free to stretch and move and take a sip of water. Do whatever you need to do to be comfortable. So for many of us, experienced meditators and people that are new to practice alike, one of the common features of sitting is that we get lost in a chain of thoughts. Something occurs internally or externally, and it just stimulates a thought sequence. There is nothing amiss in meditation when that happens. But this is where your strong intention right at the outset comes into play. So we're sitting in a context. The context is that we're following the breath or doing a body scan or something like that. We're committed to returning our attention repeatedly to the present moment by locating it in some aspect of our bodily process, the feeling of the breath. So something occurs, a sound in the street outside. My mind goes off out there. It wonders, is that a car? Is it a lorry? Where's it going? Who's in it? Etc., etc. And a whole sequence of thoughts are set in motion. But because I'm sitting in a context of, I've decided to follow the breath for half an hour or whatever, when I notice, when I recognize that my mind, my thoughts are in play and that my attention has drifted, I know it in that context. So the breath, the body, provides the context for the sit. We're not just going through life, just, daydreaming. We have a context, and the breath is the context, or the body is the context. So we can recognize in relationship to our original intention to follow the breath, we can recognize that we've drifted. That's the point of the practice. So it's recognizing, re-knowing where we are. And the useful thing about following the breath in this way is that it's always there. We can't not have it. So the context is always there for us. And of course, many teachers talk at that point about letting go, and that's right. This is the second R of meditation, release. We release the thought. We don't follow it. We don't resist it. It's there. We don't beat ourselves up over it. We're not on the breath. We haven't made a mistake. It's natural. This is what minds do. So with kindness, we notice, we recognize that we've drifted. Very important element there. And I really encourage you to weave this into your practice. Just kindness for yourself. Don't get into a fight with yourself. Don't get into criticizing yourself. So many of us have come through education systems, backgrounds that we've been endlessly harangued and criticized and told we're not doing things right. In meditation, I encourage you to let go of all of that and just to introduce kindness and compassion for yourself. And right at this point in your practice where you notice you've drifted, that's the place to bring in the kindness. Of course I have. No wonder. I'm a human. I have a mind, an active mind. And this is the practice. This is the process. That's how we release with kindness. No wonder. I'm a human. It's okay. That's the place to bring in the kindness and to release the thought sequence. The inner critic that Ajahn Suchito so often talks about is really a useful notion here. We all have this inner critic sitting on our shoulder going, you're getting it wrong, you're getting it wrong, you've drifted again, you're not doing it right, you're not as good as anyone else, etc., etc. And I'm sure, well, if we haven't got one, many of us have something like that in the background of our conditioning. And it's recognizing that, knowing that for what it is, seeing it, and allowing ourselves to move into something different, a different way of relating to ourselves. This is freedom. This direction, freedom lies. This is the path to liberation. And it's not easy. I don't pretend for one moment it's easy. But it's that point in your practice where you've drifted from the body, you're lost in a thought sequence, and you recognize it. That's the place to bring in the kindness and the compassion for yourself. And of course, the third R in the practice is return. Return to the breath. This is your anchor. This is your home. This is the place where you know you can feel your life process. This is life going on as it is. This is knowing things as they are. As Ajahn Subhaddo used to say, it's like this. This breath I'm sensing right now, it's like this. I don't have to add anything to it. I don't have to resist it. It's like this. There's a place that they talk of in the Tibetan tradition called Rigpa. It's this open, spacious quality of knowing. And you find it in the Theravadan tradition as well. It's just this open spaciousness that is our true home. This is the true home of our minds. I recall someone who attended Ajahn Subhaddo's teaching a couple of weeks ago, reported to me that he talked about becoming the path. So in the Buddhist tradition, we talk of the Noble Eightfold Path, and we very much we think of it, and if you read it in the literature, it's a sequence of right thought, right view, all the right mindfulness, right concentration, right effort, all those sorts of things. And he talked about becoming the path, being the path, and I think that's a really useful notion. And one way to do this is to weave into your practice this sense of kindness and compassion for yourself. In that way, this is what brings the right element into play. This is where it's balanced. This is where we're in alignment with our true nature, when we're kind and compassionate to ourselves. Any questions that people would like to ask? I notice the time is drifting on. If you don't want to speak, you're welcome to put a question in the chat down at the bottom of your screen. I think it's, if you're new to Zoom, it's center screen on the base of the screen. It's a little thing called chat, and you can just type in a message there. But if you would like to unmute yourself, Wangdu will allow you to do that, I'm sure. And just ask a question. I don't guarantee I can answer it. If I can't, I'll send a message to Ajahn Subhaddo, who's going to be teaching next week, and perhaps he will. So, I tell you one thing that, just whilst you're thinking of your own question, I'll tell you one thing that does crop up quite frequently. I've got a question. I'll come back to my one. I'll answer the one that's come. Yes, okay, that's a lovely question. Beautiful. The question is, can we be in that space and lose the need to follow the breath? And yes, my answer would be undoubtedly yes. We can be in that space of knowing where we don't have to follow the breath. And that I am told takes practice. But yes, there is a practice where we are so settled, we are so grounded in the present moment that the breath and the awareness of the breath, although it's still there, it's no longer the central focus. We don't need to be located on the breath. We know it's there. It's part of our 360 degrees field of consciousness. The breath is in there, it's in the mix, but we don't need to be located specifically on the breath. And we can rest in that knowing. In the literature, if you look at, there's a lot of very good meditation guides, but certainly you'll find this sometimes referred to as bare attention. We're simply resting our awareness in whatever is entering our field of consciousness at that moment, but we're not getting lost in it and we're not resisting it. So there is a place, yes, there definitely is a place. And this is, if you're new to practice, you may find one day you just slip into that. And you may find that if you've been at it for years, you occasionally touch into it. And it's useful to recognize what you're in and to know it for what it is. But yes, it's a beautiful question. And again, I would say this way liberation lies. And I would add the rider, the caveat to this is that I think a place like that in meditation is a fruit. It's a fruit of practice. And as with any of you that are gardeners know, we tend the soil first. We water the plant. We protect it from the wind and the rain. We give it the right conditions. We nurture the soil, and the fruit will look after itself. So, yeah, a lovely question. And it's useful to know that that is a possibility for all of us. You don't need to be anything special to walk that route. You just need to be human and have a commitment. So that was a lovely question. Thank you very much for that. I perhaps will refer it to Ajahn Subhaddo for next week to see if he could add anything to it. I'm sure he would have quite some useful things to say about that. So one of the other questions that frequently crops up is, how do I deal with distractions, either internal ones or external ones? Now, you know the external ones, it's some noisy people out in the street just below where you're meditating or something like that, and it's distracting. And that's quite an easy one to deal with. Well, I say easy, but everything's relative. This is really a question of, you know it's there, you don't have any control over it. You know, the people out there in the street or outside your room, for instance, you're committed to staying where you are. You're not going to tell them to shut up or anything like that. You're going to sit through whatever the noise is, whatever the sounds that are coming into your ears are. And it's a question of recognizing that these sounds, these are disturbances, but not focusing on them. We don't have to get into a fight with them. We just allow them to come, we allow them to go, and they may be disturbing, and we allow that to happen as well. So it's really one of total acceptance of whatever it is that's coming from the outside into our senses. We just allow it with as much equanimity and kindness and compassion as we can. And that's the practice. So in a way, that's quite easy to describe how to deal with it. To actually deal with it is another thing. And there may be all sorts of other considerations and conditions to be taken into account. But generally, just don't make an issue of it. You know, just sit through it. Commit to staying where you are. What is it they say? Keeping this one seat. Keeping your center. So that's external distractions. Internal ones. You know, you come to do a sit and you've got something buzzing around in your head. It's been going on all day. And you say to yourself before you sit down to practice, you say, okay, I'm just going to put that aside for the time being. And you're 1 minute into your sit and there it is again. It's just a concern. It can even be a tune that you've been listening to in the car radio before you got home, something like that. And it's just buzzing around. You can't get rid of it. Now, in a way, these are more difficult to deal with than the external ones, because the external ones, you know, by and large, you have no control over. Whereas the internal ones, you think, well, I've got some control over this. And the danger there is you get into a fight with it. Now, one of the dangers of getting into a fight with anything, internal or external, is you give it energy. So if you start saying to yourself, I mustn't be thinking of this, I mustn't be singing that tune to myself when I should be meditating, you make a battle. You get into a struggle and you give the thing that you're trying to not be in your brain, you give it energy and it's there with even more energy. So that would be one reflection, is don't get into a fight with anything. So it may be a case of just accepting that it's there and I don't have to fight it. What's the saying? I think it goes like something, that which you resist persists. So I think really here, the sense of letting it be would be the route to follow. Just let it be. Just let it run its course. You know these little toys that children have, like a car with a spring in it, and they wind it up along the floor like that, and then they let it go and it goes off along the floor to the end of the corridor or something like that, and then it runs out of the spring, uncoils, and it gradually comes to a halt. Well, our minds are very often like that. They're coiled up springs, and sometimes we just have to let things unravel and just run their course, which doesn't mean to say we can't practice. We may know that we're actually particularly pent up, agitated. We have a pressing concern, And it's just knowing this is our mind state right now and allowing it to be that way. And here, again, the kindness and compassion can come into play. If you can know your own mind state with kindness and compassion, just a reflection. No wonder I'm feeling like this. Of course I am. I'm a human. And given what I've been through, how couldn't I be? Just knowing it for what it is and receiving it with kindness and compassion, that can go a long way to just releasing the power it has over you. So, what else could I say about distractions? I think that's probably, yes, we've done with an external one, we've looked at an internal one. Any other questions? That's probably enough, isn't it, this evening for you to chew on? I see nothing else in the chat. So what I suggest we do is just to close our evening together. Let's just sit for 5 minutes before I just give you the closing homage, and we can just calm ourselves down before we go back to the rest of our evening. So let's just sit for 5 minutes. Thank you all very much for coming this evening. I really, and the Buddhist Society really appreciate your company and your attendance. I look forward to seeing some of you again on Monday. There's the lunchtime meditation class tomorrow, I believe, and on Monday. And Ajahn Subhaddo will be taking this class next week, and Colin will be back the week after that. So thank you all very much for attending. It's really appreciated. The closing homage. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dharma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So thank you all very much for attending. I wish you a good week. Go well.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
You're
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.